You're listening to Oilersnation Radio, presented by the Nation Network. Subscribe for free on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm Tyler Rumchuk. Welcome into episode 84 of Oilersnation Radio. Baggedmilk is he's on the bench this week. No, he's not dead. He's having some work done to his townhouse, and he's worried that the noise outside is going to cause his dog to go nuts, which means he won't be able to have good audio for the podcast. So as the producer and as the guy who has to edit this, I thank him for making that responsible decision to sit this week out. But Dan is here, Rick is here, and so is blonde Zach Laing, which is different from when we had you on about a month ago. But Zach, how has quarantine been treating you?
Well, I'm blonde now, so yes. I've hit my quarantine crisis point already and completely changed my hairstyle. But it's going well. I don't know.
How are provincials?
Provincials. Oh, they were great. Yeah, the Bantam team. You know.
Yeah, you look at your hair and you're like, damn, I don't know what sport you're playing, man. But how'd you get finished?
Yeah, no, Bantam team didn't do well in the playoffs this year. We were eliminated after the first game, so it was all for naught apparently. But I still think I got a better hairdo than Milan Lucic does. So we'll roll with that.
We'll have to post a side by side photo on social media, I think.
Actually,
done deal.
That'd be good for the Oilersnation Radio Instagram account.
Not the Twitter account.
It's actually been, the Twitter. Oh, no, yeah, the Twitter account's gone. Damn. It's actually been like a really busy week around Oilersnation and the organization. Ken Holland is taking this quarantine time to sign every single prospect that needs to be signed for the Oilers. I believe all of them are defensemen. Marcus Niemelainen, Patrick Berglund. Philip Berglund. Patrick Berglund is another player in the NHL. But I'll start with you on this one, Dan. What do you think of the activity Ken Holland has been doing as of late, and the fact that he's just seemingly stocking up on defensemen?
I like it. I mean, it's good to just stay the course with these guys. I can't pretend to know any more than anybody else sitting here in North America to know how Marcus Niemelainen has been doing in Liga play or Philip Berglund in SHL play, other than my prospect update where I just put in the numbers to tell you where they're at. Berglund had 20 points through 52 games as a right-hand defenseman. That's not bad. Niemelainen had 7 points through 54 games. You know, who knows? Maybe he's just a shutdown defenseman. Who knows? But it is good to see that you would imagine that Ken Holland has taken the time to really look at these guys. Whereas, you know, in previous years, it would have waited until the summer and then maybe it's a little bit more of a rush job. So he's actually been given some time to look into stuff. Defensive depth, super important. Good to have all kinds of options in the cupboard there. I think he showed that this year with the forwards, going out and getting the Hosses and the Nygaards of the world. So grab that kid out of I say kid. He's 25?
Yeah.
Out of Sweden. It's not bad to have that defensive depth, right? You gotta think that means that there's probably somebody else heading out the door. I think we've been saying that now for probably 17 episodes straight. But it's good to have that defensive depth.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think there's nothing wrong with taking a chance on a few scratch tickets and hoping that, like, I don't think with any of these guys they're going to be, you know, top 4 D-men at any point, but you're taking flyers on Niemelainen, Berglund, and even Theodore Lundstrom. I think we're all going to call him Teddy, though, right? Is that going to be the consensus?
Teddy, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely Teddy Lundstrom. He signs a 1-year entry-level deal as well. I think you're just kind of taking flyers on guys and hoping at some point maybe they find their way to be, you know, a good bottom-pairing defenseman that you can use for dirt cheap for a couple of seasons before you kind of got to move on from them. But if there's one position where you want to have a ton of depth, it's defenseman.
You got to fill your Bakersfield team too, right? Like, not all these guys can be expected to even have NHL runs coming up one day. But like Dan was saying, I honestly think that he's just treating this like the summer. Who knows what happens when we start? Who knows what type of gap there's going to be between lifting the cup and dropping the puck on game 1? You've got some dead time where there's really nothing going on. You might as well just take care of all these little details right now, because what else do you have to do?
Well, and, you know, for Berglund and for Niemelainen, they're both 2-year contracts, and the Lundstrom contract is only 1 year. So there's really no risk in finding these guys to a contract and seeing what they can do, because you look at Bakersfield, and they've been depleted this last season and a half, with so many of their top guys kind of coming up to Edmonton. The Kyler Yamamotos, the Ethan Bears, the Caleb Joneses of the world. So Bakersfield needs some help, and these might be three guys who can come in down there and help contribute off the back end for the Condors.
Sorry, Tyler, but we're forgetting the biggest signing this week. Helping out Bakersfield.
How far into the episode are we right now? 11 minutes?
It's not Esposito. It's Brad Malone signing another 2 years with the organization. It's just he's checking off the boxes.
Is it a two-way or an AHL only?
AHL only.
Pretty sure it's AHL only. Yeah, he's probably done his call up unless we get to like emergency depth, which knock on wood, we never see that deep of a drop. But but he's it's just good. It's good to have some continuity with the organization too. Like Zach said, like you're getting some guys that just check the boxes and can hold those spots for you for a couple of years. And you know what you have in a Brad Malone. You know what you have in Niemelainen and Berglund, and you're not having to go out and try and figure it out and test it out. So yeah, it's a fine time, and it's one of those things like if Holland wasn't making the moves, we'd be all like, well, what the hell is Ken Holland doing? Right? Like it's just he's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, he's checking off some boxes. The thing with Malone, and Zach, you touched on it as well. When you talk about developing prospects through your system, having a good culture, and I know that's a bit of a buzzword, but having a good culture in your minor leagues and having a team that, consistently not maybe win games or make the playoffs every year, but can stay in games, and having some good veterans down there that can teach some of the younger players how to be good pros. I think that's where signing a guy like Brad Malone and, you groom a guy like Esposito, a guy like Josh Curry that might still be down there. Having those types of guys is really, really important for just the strength of your organization as a whole, whereas it's in areas that might not affect your NHL team.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think Malone was in the midst of his best American Hockey League season down there, 31 points in 49 games. Over the last 3 years, he's had 89 points in 148. So, he's one of those veteran guys who can kind of help show the way for these young guys, the Kyler Yamamotos, the Tyler Benson, Cooper Hirokis, who are, sort of those incoming next wave of Edmonton Oilers. And culture is such a buzzword in hockey, but it's something that's true. You have to build a good culture for your team and your organization. These are just a couple of those signings that help do that and bring some continuity to an organization that hasn't had a lot of it in a long time.
Well, and that's the other thing too, Tyler, and you just kind of nodded on to it as well. But Ken Holland has created in Detroit one of the best AHL teams going. Grand Rapids Griffins every year have made the playoffs for the last, I'm looking at this straight now, I think it's 7 seasons in a row. So that's like, they're not winning the championship every time, although they've won 2 Calder Cup finals in that time. But you've got some guys there that are getting some experience, and they're getting their teeth cut on playoff hockey, even if it is the AHL, it's still good hockey. So
he needs some quality veterans to go along with those guys.
Well, exactly.
Young guys
you're not filling out the roster you're not filling out a Bakersfield roster with all your prospects, because it's not possible. You got guys over in Europe, you've got guys in junior hockey. It's not happening. But if you've got your core guys that you're happy to build a team around, and when a new kid comes into town, the older guys are able to kind of take them under their wing and teach them what it's like to be in the AHL and what it's like to be a pro. It can only mean good things for the big club once those kids come up after over percolating in the AHL. I put air quotes around that, but no one can see it because it's a podcast.
But you look at a guy like Bear, right? Like he might be one of those guys that has over percolated in his young pro hockey career, and he got that extra time in Bakersfield. And you look at the way that he was able to step up and contribute on such a massive level for the Edmonton Oilers this season as a rookie defenseman. Now, you don't see a lot of rookie defensemen, especially with the acumen that he has as a late round draft pick, stepping in as a rookie, being able to do that. And I think it just goes to show, the tremendous AHL system that we got down there now with Jay Woodcroft running the show. I mean, I remember when Jay Woodcroft got put into that role, and I was thinking, man, like I don't see him wanting to stick around there for more than a year, but I think he's really enjoying being able to work with and develop so many of these young guys that are now coming up and showing that they're impact players for the Oilers.
Yeah, I think the Woodcroft element to this, I'm really happy the organization kept him around, because I was hearing some pretty strong rumors that Todd McClellan and the LA Kings made Woodcroft a pretty sizable financial offer to join Todd in LA and to go back to being Todd's associate coach. And I believe Woodcroft just kind of went to the Oilers and said, up the pay a little bit, and I like the idea of running my own bench. So I'm really happy that he decided to stay in the organization, because that's a big thing as well. Having a guy in the minors who kind of knows how to connect with the younger players and who can understand the balance of trying to win games and playing your veterans and treating them right, while also understanding that you are the developmental league and you do need to, help push players to the next level. I think having a guy like Woodcroft it's invaluable, man. It's huge.
Yeah, especially too for an organization that has gone through, what is it now, 7 head coaches in the NHL level. That includes, chewing up and spitting out Todd Nelson, who just, got his interim tag, and then when we didn't give him the job for the second time, he said peace. And then who was the coach that was in before Woodcroft?
Down in Baco?
Yeah.
Fleming.
Escaping my mind. Yeah.
Fleming, yeah.
And so there's, it's just, like, organizationally, we need to give these people some rocks to kind of build around, and when you've got a coach down there that the expectations of, and you've got a coach up here that the expectations of, it can't be anything but good for you, as opposed to having a new head coach to come up to every time you get called up, and new systems to have to learn every season after the off season because you got a new AHL head coach. It's just, I hope that these kind of stay the course, and I think they will as success continues to come. Knock on wood. But Tyler, you're right. It's needed.
I kind of buried the lead in terms of most important signings. I'm not sure if we touched on it last week on Oilersnation Radio, but Gaetan Haas on Monday officially signed a 1-year extension with the team. This is interesting for a handful of reasons. Before we get to sort of the outlook of the entire forward group, bringing back Gaetan Haas, I'll start with you, Rick. Did he do enough in that first season, do you think, to earn this next deal?
For what he got, I think he did. Just 1 year, $825 or whatever it is. I think that's just fine. It's a guy that when you start to sign these guys, what your floor of what your team is going to be. Like if he's going to be a fourth liner, it's not going to get any worse than that. It allows someone to sneak up and play above him, and if you have to, you can put him down in the AHL, and it doesn't hurt you at all. So I think it's a good safety net to have. You're going into the off season whenever we get there, if we get there, with pretty much a whole roster done, a couple guys who have cheap enough contracts, you can put them in the AHL if you end up fucking signing somebody, or if Benson or if someone else down there comes up and grabs a spot next year. So it gives you that versatility with the contract, but it also gives you that security of knowing exactly what you have and where you have them.
Well, and this is a team that, outside of a shitty December, we're probably the number 1 team in the division right now. Like, and you could still say that if the playoff scenarios play out how they are going to, or how they're supposed to right now, I mean that changes minute to minute, hour to hour. But if they playoff scenarios go on right now, and it's Vegas versus Edmonton to try to decide the top seed, I'm not convinced that Vegas beats us in a 3-game series. So it's for a team, again, we keep talking about it, we keep hammering on the continuity thing, but this is a successful team, and Holland's got a team that he can kind of stay the course with, and then make tweaks here and there with trades. We still don't know what we have with Athanasiou. We don't even know if Ennis is coming back next year, but those are pieces that maybe you can tweak in and out and make adjustments in season. But for the most part, he's got kind of a blueprint to work with for success, and then he can just keep adding to it. And you think that the defense is going to keep getting better, keep growing up together, with Caleb Jones getting a full season under his belt next year. Like, it's just the blueprint is there. Now he can make his tweaks and adjustments as needed.
Zach, your take on Haas?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a safe signing. It's a 1-year deal. It's a no risk, moderate reward for a fourth liner who proved that he has some strong defensive acumen. I mean, what more do you want out of your fourth line center than somebody who can, play strong defensive hockey? I don't think that there's any risk in this to be upset about. And I think, at the very least, what your floor is, like Rick said, and you hope that a guy comes in and outplays Gaetan Haas for the fourth line center role. I think that's kind of the mindset you have with that signing and bringing him back for another year. But I don't see there being much risk at all.
Well, another thing too with Haas, and it's something I brought up on Real Life earlier in the week, but he only had one NHL season under his belt. Like, I still like the idea of he's 28 years old, yes, but he's very, very new to North American hockey. I think there's a chance that Gaetan Haas next year is, a bit better than what Gaetan Haas was last year. I think there's a chance. You mentioned someone stepping in and outplaying him. I think Haas outplays himself in a way and can actually be a little bit more effective and a little bit more confident at the NHL level than he was last season. So now that brings me to my next point, which was the amount of forwards the Oilers have under contract next season. McDavid, Draisaitl, Nuge, Neal. We can assume Athanasiou is going to be there. Chason, Cassian, Jujhar Khaira, Josh Archibald, Gaetan Haas, Kyler Yamamoto. If you want to go ahead and count Tyler Benson as one of those options as well, I mean, all of a sudden you're looking at 5, 6, 9, 10, 11 forwards already under contract, counting Athanasiou, who's an RFA, under team control, I should say. And that's not counting Sheahan, Ennis, or Patrick Russell. Out of Sheahan, Ennis, and Russell, I'll start with you on this one, Dan. How many of those 3 UFA forwards do you think are back with the organization next year?
Well, I think the caveat, of course, is how much money they get. And we're still in the unknown world of what the cap is going to look like next year. So that obviously plays in everything. I think that if you get Sheahan even at a slight bump up from what he's making right now, he's a great third line center. I think you have the makings of a pretty good NHL third line there with Archibald and him, and then whoever you want to slide in on the other side. So I would say Sheahan's probably I would say he's like 98% an Oiler for me. When it comes to Ennis, you gotta I don't know. It's one of those things, because if nobody has money, then maybe you get Ennis on a song, or for what he's making right now. But I don't know. I didn't look at it when we got Ennis. I looked at Ennis as a rental and not a forever an Oiler. So I would say probably not an Ennis on our team next year. And then you said Jujhar was the other one?
Patrick Russell.
Patrick Russell. Yeah. I don't know. He's one of those, I think, he's a scratch ticket that didn't pan out.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And that's what scratch tickets are there for. But we have to start finding the money that, that doesn't exist right now, because there is just such tight numbers on the cap room. And then also we're forgetting the rumors of Sam Gagner coming back for a year too, right? So there's not that many forward spots left, and a guy like Patrick Russell not that effective. A guy like Ennis could be effective, but wasn't probably in our long-term plans money-wise.
The interesting thing with Tyler Ennis is that the UFA market, I think, is going to be real weird if the cap doesn't go up, and guys like Ennis, who had good seasons, probably won't be able to cash in on them the way they would have liked. So if you're Tyler Ennis and the Oilers come to you and say, hey, 1 year, $1.25 million, he could sit there and go, you know what, I come back, maybe I click with McDavid, maybe I get a little power play time, maybe I score 20, 25 goals, and next summer when some teams have a little bit more wiggle room to spend, or maybe the cap goes up by $1 million after next season, maybe a guy like Ennis can cash in after that on a 2-3 year deal. But Zach, what do you think of the idea of bringing back Tyler Ennis?
Oh, I think you have to. I mean, I think you gave up an asset for him at the deadline. It wasn't a very expensive asset, but Ennis was a guy who last year, in his time in Ottawa, proved that he can be an effective threat on the ice. I mean, I just think that he's a very valuable player that can play up and down the lineup. You look at how excited he was after he got traded to Edmonton too. He was on After Hours and talked about his excitement of being a hometown boy, coming back to play in Edmonton, the team that he grew up watching and idolizing. So, I think that there's probably going to be an appetite from the player to come back. And I think there should definitely be an appetite from the team, because, we only got a really small window to look of 10 games maybe with Ennis out there. And I really thought that he looked like a pretty solid addition to the team. He stepped in as a vet and played with McDavid and Draisaitl at times and looked well doing it. So, and you're right. I think given the weird landscape of the sports world and what's going to happen with the salary cap moving forward, I think there's a good chance you're able to get him on the cheap and have him come in as a real effective player for the Oilers.
Yeah, I think Sheahan's the important one to get signed. I think that's who they're going to put. They're going to put all their priorities on him. But that's going to come down to what he wants to sign for. You were right though, Ty, with the cap being a little bit different this year than normal. You might be able to get him on a little bit of a cheaper deal. So I'd assume it's just going to be a 1 year, and then he'll allow him to try UFA again. And it's same thing though. It's going to be you're going to sit there and just look at who's out there then. Like, you can't fill up your whole roster without knowing who's out there as a UFA. There might be somebody out there who is a top 6 forward that, you know, you're better off trying to squeeze into your lineup rather than sitting there with an Ennis. So I think he'll be a decision that you can make later on in the offseason, I think. But I think right now it's just an open book on him. Like, there's no real leaning one way or the other, because you have to see what else is available out there to add to your lineup.
As always, Oilers Nation Radio is brought to you by the fine folks over at Sherwood Ford. Check them out. Now seems to be a great time to buy a new car. They got a ton of used, new, anything you need. Sherwood Ford can help you out with your car buying experience. I kind of like the armchair GM conversation we have going here, our little armchair GM roundtable. So I'm going to keep it rolling, and I'm going to throw another one at you guys. I rattled off the players for next season who are under contract. Some of them, you know, their contract isn't exactly a bargain. And the guys I'm looking at, obviously James Neal, but he scored 19 goals, but, you know, he's going to be 33 next year. He's making $5.75 million. Alex Chason, $2.1 million next season, but he's a UFA after that. Jujhar Khaira at $1.2 million. He's inconsistent. He is a good penalty killer, but at 5-on-5, he struggles. If the Oilers do go and, you know, bring back Sheahan, and let's say they bring back Gagne to be their extra forward, and they end up with a spare part or two, is there any one of Khaira, Chason, or Neal that you could realistically see being dealt before next season?
I can see them trying to get a Neal. I don't know if anyone's going to pick it up, but I can see them trying to get out of there. And there's also going to be the opportunity of the buyout. And if that is a possibility, I think that's just where you go with it. And it's just purely because of the dollar amount. The difference in play between Chason and Neal is not $4 million or whatever it is. You know, that's where you kind of like take it. And I think Juge is an RFA, and yeah, he's definitely hasn't had a great year 5-on-5, but he brings some abilities to the game that are still necessary. He still has he can still play that rough and tough. Like, when we get to the playoffs here, a player like him may actually elevate and look a little more better out there. And you only have to give him that 10% raise too, right? So it's not like you're giving him that much more money. So I could see them trying to get at a Neal, keeping Chiasson, and Jujhar. I do think you hold on to him. Like, I know it sounds funny, but even if you have a $1.2 million guy sitting upstairs as your 13th or 14th, I think he still just brings that ability. Like, if you did have to dress him, you know you got a solid PK guy. You know you've got a guy who can who's not gonna get pushed around out there. And when the game gets a little bit tougher, you're gonna want players like that.
You mentioned the James Neal buyout. For those listening that want to know the details on that, he has 3 more seasons at $5.75 million. If the Oilers were to buy him out, it would turn into 6 more seasons at $1.9 million. So you would save $3.8 million for the next 3 seasons, and then for 3 years after that, it's a $1.9 million penalty against your cap. I'm not a huge fan of the James Neal buyout.
I was referring to like a free buyout though. Like, if we are getting the compliance one. Yeah, I don't know if I use the buyout if it is the way it is. I think I use the buyout if they give you that free one.
The idea of him and Chason, like, I kind of agree with sort of what you're saying, Rick, where they're a similar player. And in my opinion, if I can get out from either Chason or Neal, I would do it and try to use that savings to sign Ennis, just because he brings you something a little bit different. Like, to me, Neal and Chason are both guys who don't skate very well. They can be physical at times, but in an ideal world, they're playing on your third line. And do you want both those guys playing in your bottom 6? They can help you on your power play, no doubt, but at 5-on-5, they're just really similar. And I think having both those guys is maybe handcuffs you a bit, whereas if you were to get a guy like Tyler Ennis in here, he brings you a little bit of speed. You're a little bit more confident in his ability to move up the lineup as well. I'll come to you next, Zach. Out of Neal or Chiasson, do you think they're both Oilers next season?
I don't know. I think you try and move Neal if you can. I think Chiasson can do what James Neal can do at 5-on-5 and on the power play. I mean, Chiasson is an option, and you see him down low a lot around the net. 5-on-5, Chiasson is a solid player. He's one of our better players at 5-on-5, actually, when you start to look at the underlying numbers and everything that comes along with it. So, I got time for Chiasson. He's only got 1 year left. Maybe he's a guy you try and flip at the deadline to a team who's looking for a vet for a push in the playoffs, who's got, experience winning a Stanley Cup. I think that's kind of the way you go about those two guys there.
Dan?
I mean, I think getting rid of Neal is 1A, and again, like Rick said, it's not anything against the players. That dollar amount doesn't make sense for the guy.
Yeah.
And then 1B is getting rid of Chiasson. But I believe, I don't know, in my heart of hearts, I believe that the reason we went out and got that Swedish defenseman is because one of our defensemen is heading out the door. Whether that's a Chris Russell type, I don't know. But
Russell. I don't see Russell being here next year without the Swedish guy.
I think that's where you're finding your value more than anything, just because people are willing to pay for a defenseman like Russell for what he does versus the trade off of what a Neal or a Chiasson can possibly do for your power play, but are going to be tougher during 5-on-5 time. And then with Jujhar Khaira, it's like, I don't know if we can look at our PK and be like, this is the best PK in the league, and kind of discount a guy like that who does play really an important role on the PK. You need those defensive specialists. I know they are dying off. It's not like the old days where you could have a shadow for the best player on the other team kind of thing.
But he's not like that. He also does bring other aspects to the game, right? He's not just like that. And I don't know what guy I'm going to bring up, like a Guy Carbonneau who is just, they're killing penalties all the time.
Yeah.
He does bring, he's able to skate. He does skate pretty well, especially for a guy his size. He has decent hands. When he has his confidence, he has a pretty good game, But he just did not have it at all this year. And I think that's why I put him where I did, is that he just has some more positives I'm not really willing to give up yet.
Well, and you're not getting any value out of giving up a $1.2 million player. You have to replace that player, right? So it's not like
with another 1.2. Exactly. What kind of negatives are he going to have?
It's not like you're going to tuck a guy in under that for a better value than what you have on a Jujhar. And again, another player that we have control over, like Rick said. So I don't know. Who knows with the landscape that we're looking at, whether there'll be a team that could fit a James Neal in without sending back an albatross of a contract themselves. So I don't know. It remains to be seen, but it's an interesting thought experiment at least.
Yeah,
I would make sure we all vote for the Twitter vote. We vote for the free buyout when the NHL puts those to decide how we do this. The Twitter vote. Make sure we click on it.
I'm going to push back a little bit on Khaira just because, to me, like, you could bring back a guy like Patrick Russell for $700,000 and save yourself $500K. And yes, I know Khaira was important to the penalty kill and all that. But even if you lose Khaira, I mean, Chiasson can play on your PK if he's still here. You got a guy like Sheahan who's probably going to be brought back. Archibald as well. Nuge is good on the PK. Draisaitl's good on the PK. So to me, a guy like Khaira who's really inconsistent at 5-on-5, you could save $500,000 off the cap. And if the cap doesn't go up, the Oilers, they're in a tight squeeze, and they're going to probably have to move on from a guy like Chris Russell if it's even possible with the cap not going up at all. And they're probably going to have to move on from a couple of forwards as well that make more than $1 million. So I think in a tight cap situation, you need to look every little way you can save a couple pennies, and Khaira just might be one of those opportunities to me.
So my counterpoint to your counterpoint would be with a guy like Patrick Russell, you're looking at a guy that's in the prime of his life, and isn't as good as Jujhar Khaira is when he's 25. And Khaira, for the last 2 seasons, while hasn't blown the doors off offensively or anything, has been a consistent guy at around that 20-point mark.
Yeah.
And he hasn't been the liability that he was this year, right? So it's one of those things. You look at his whole career, and it's like, was this year an off year, or was this year an indication of the true player? I don't know, but I would tend to believe it's more of just an off year. And I don't think we're in a position to just give up on that right now. But I mean, you're right. Trying to find money, you're squeezing dimes right now because it's that tight. We were already going to be tight, and then a pandemic happened, so it's tough to do no matter what you do.
Yeah, and I look at it, I go, okay, their top 9, let's call it, is probably going to have, or will have McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent-Hopkins, Neal, Athanasiou, Zach Kassian's in there as well, Archibald's in there as well, Yamamoto's going to be in there as well. To me, Kara's just a fourth liner, or he's potentially even an extra forward at times. So, yes, there could maybe be a little bit more upside with him, but the chances of a fourth liner on the Oilers suddenly realizing some sort of potential, I think it's a little slim.
I think his potential to reach that new potential, there's probably a little bit of an outreach right now, but just to get back to what he's been when he's been at his best, I don't think that's too much of a hope.
This has been a really good conversation, and actually I almost want to table it for now, and maybe next week we can go armchair GM mode again and maybe tackle some of the issues on the blue line for the Edmonton Oilers, because we got a few other things to get to. I want to debate the Oilers all-time team, but first, some of the recent news that came out from around the NHL, and somewhat specifically in Edmonton, was with Alberta Health Services announcing that they're changing up or loosening some regulations around the city and around the province. Ryan Rishaug had a couple of interesting tweets. He said that hub cities have begun submitting proposals to the NHL following detailed criteria that the league has asked for. Testing is going to be a big issue to get sorted out. He adds that more substantive talks planned for next week between the Oilers and Alberta Health Services. Says that AHS has expressed an openness to working with the Oilers to find a solution. And then there was Bill Daly, who went on Leafs Lunch in Toronto. He said the NHL expects to be paying for whatever testing is needed to return, which is believed to be a big hurdle. Says the league never wants to be in a position where they're denying the public and those who need it from getting the tests. And he said they're totally in lockstep with the Players Association, and says he can't remember a time when they've been so much on the same page. But I'll start with you again on this one, Dan. Alberta Health Services relaxing a few things. Does that make you more optimistic that we might get NHL hockey in this city?
It's a political conversation that I don't know if I want to wade into too much. But I do believe that, and I've watched a couple of documentaries that have told me as such that in past pandemics, cities that have reopened too early, quote unquote, have had to revert back to the previous setting of lockdown just to try and normalize things. So it's going to be a very telling couple of weeks here as things reopen, if we can continue, because Edmonton's done a really good job. I don't feel like, I know that a lot of businesses have shut down and all that kind of stuff, but I feel like other than the outside of like the first week or first 2 weeks of this, that it's like that the world has shut down in Edmonton. It seems like everybody just kind of, adjusted to the new normal and did a really good job about it. But it remains to be seen whether the city can handle reopening in that first stage. It's cool to see. It's good to see that Alberta Health Services is willing to work with the NHL and willing to work with the Oilers on this, because we have done so well in the city of Edmonton. But I don't know. We'll see. And the other thing too is that as a province, we're not doing so well, and we have a couple of issues in areas. And if we reopen the entire province, but then part of the province sees issues, are they just going to shut down the entire province, or are they only going to shut down the city? So it's I don't know. It's one of those things. Again, it's exciting to see. You're hopeful that that hockey can come back and that we can identify 4 cities that can handle this and do it the right way. But I'm worried as to what happens in the next 2 weeks first.
As we're recording this, Don Iveson says that if there's an opportunity for the city and the Oilers to be part of helping the NHL finish the season, they'd be open to that. But he says it's not at the top of the city's priority list. Says he'd like to see it happen, but it needs to be safe to be possible. Zach Laing, what do you think of the regulations being relaxed a little bit? Like me, I'm kind of with Dan, where I get an uneasy feeling. I'm just like, oh man, like we better be sure. We better not be doing this just because we're bored, right?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think again, it's difficult because it is largely a political conversation that that has to be held, and there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that we're not privy to when it comes to this sort of thing. But you look at a place like California, who had issued complete lockdown orders for the entire state, and as soon as they relaxed those rules, they had to re-shut down the entire state only a week later, because people took it as, oh, well, everything's fine and everything's normal, when in reality nothing's fine and nothing's normal right now. And that's the difficult thing that I'm hesitant about. You look at a place like Edmonton has done a great job in doing the quote flattening of the curve. We're in single digit new case numbers every day, and that's fantastic. But you look at a place like Calgary, where they're still, like yesterday, they reported almost 200 new cases. My concern is that as soon as you start to relax these things, you're going to start to see further outbreaks and further issues that come with it. And who knows if maybe this is the right thing to do. I don't know, and that's the difficult thing. But I know for myself, I'm hesitant even about Edmonton being a host city for NHL games, because I think it's going to be incredibly difficult for the league to do this in a healthy and safe way. Because as soon as one player gets it, we know how quickly this virus can spread. So, even for Bill Daly to have come out and said the other week, well, no, we wouldn't consider shutting things down if one case was reported. I think that's dangerous. I think it's a dangerous comment. I think it's a dangerous precedent in what are some very unprecedented times.
Rick?
I think you just said it right there, Zach. We do only have single-digit new cases every day, right? And some have been one, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we did bring in another, and I don't even know how, let's say 1,000 people, if that's what it takes to bring in for everybody from the players to whatever else needs to be brought in for this, I don't think it's that big of an influx. I don't see, then obviously they're going to have to be in their own quarantined area. They're not going to be allowed to go visit anybody else. They're going to be stuck in their own area. So I don't see how that's going to really affect too much to a city that's already done a really good job to keep the numbers down. Personally, I still think, I think everyone's getting a little excited, but it's still 2 weeks away, right?
Yeah.
Nothing opens for 2 weeks. So everyone is just freaking out yesterday saying this, that, and other thing. Well, let's just keep this track going downwards for 2 weeks, and then we'll see where we're at.
Some things open on May the 4th, correct?
No. Stage one is golf courses is tomorrow or May. It's tomorrow, technically. Tomorrow you can start golfing, but bars and restaurants, we're part of stage one. Stage one is May 14th.
See, and there's even, I'm even looking at that. And
we still have 2 weeks to go.
I still almost feel like it's still a couple weeks too early. For me, just
and we may figure that out.
Yeah.
But they have to sit there and they have to come up with plans, because as a dude who runs a bar, I don't want them to tell me. I don't want them to do what they do with the golf courses. I don't want to find out a day and a half before I open that I'm going to open. I want this 2 weeks. I want 10 days to, okay, good, let's go get everything in line and get it all set up. So you know what, and they have to have these plans. So when you got to ask these questions. So everybody is freaking out saying you can't even talk about that stuff yet. Well, they're not asking to open up right now. It's, if we keep doing what we're doing right now and the trending keeps going down for another 2 weeks, we're going to be in a lot of different situation, right? And then we'll be ready to go. In that time, it's also going to give whatever states in the U.S. that opened up early. If shit goes fucking haywire down there, all of a sudden we're like, okay, we can push back our start time again. We're not in the middle of it yet. We're going to see some states that are open for 3 weeks, even a month almost, I think, before we get going. And we're going to be in a very small portion of things that are opening. And if everyone just keeps following the rules, the physical distancing, the masks for most people, if everyone keeps following that stuff, then I think we'll be okay.
I think part of my problem with when people would get upset about this is that, with the golf course debate, everyone was getting mad about this in beginning of May. And I understand that the courses were mad or April. Sorry. Yeah. You know what I meant.
Yeah.
I understand that the courses, like you said, Rick, these businesses need a heads up, and it's a little unfair to just be like, tomorrow you can open. And they're just kind of like, what the fuck? We laid off half our staff because we were told we couldn't be open. But I almost would have preferred that instead of saying, you know, golf courses can open up this weekend and restaurants at the middle of May, I almost would have preferred that. And again, I'm not a doctor, so maybe shouldn't even be talking about this, but I just feel like June would have been a bit of a safer date. Like, let's give it another few weeks, but tell all these businesses, you know, you can open your doors June 1. These businesses are June 14th. I'm really worried because when we come back, I think it's going to be really hard to go back to a somewhat normal life where you can go have a beer on the patio and go golfing with your friends and, you know, go to the park and whatever, go to the park with your kids. It's going to be really hard if in July or August they all of a sudden say, psych, shutting down again. You almost want to be 100%. You don't want to be 90%, then have that chance. And it's the same thing with the NHL, to bring this back to hockey, where you don't want to bring it back, play a week of games, get fans all excited, and then be in a situation where you have to be like, fuck, we have 20 positive tests in a day in one of our quarantine sites and we have to shut it down again, right?
But if all those guys are healthy and safe where they are, and then they're brought here healthy and safe, and they're stuck in an area that's healthy and safe, I don't see where they can, the non-healthy and not safe can get in there. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, you know,
especially in a city that is 900,000, 1 million people, and we're down to less than 10 people per day. I don't know this part. I don't know the breakdown of those new cases are. If there's still that are, you know, some that are 60% older people or in specific areas even.
But it's just, it's that one person that, you know, is working in the food industry and goes home at night, and they're the ones that are serving the player, and they Well, that's what I mean. I don't think those guys do get to go. I don't think those guys do get to go home. I think anyone who's cooking for him has got to be in the quarantine. And now, don't get me wrong, dude. Like, people will, if it was like a serving or bartending thing, shit, I can cook too. If that was a thing, like, hey, you want to give us a month and come live in the hotel and do this? Fucking right, I will. I think it do. It's one, like, dudes go up north all the time for, you know, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks at a time. This would be something. It would just be an interesting 1 month story you have in your life.
Can you imagine?
Obviously, I don't have a family behind me, right? So it's not like I'm leaving anyone behind me. But yeah, I think you see that a lot more in my industry, where people are willing to do this with these weird things where it's like, oh fuck, that's a month, sure, why not?
I agree.
I'll go in
I
there.
just think that the only problem with this virus is that all it takes is one person to have, you know, gone out to a late night store, and then all of a sudden it's game over, and it's not even to say that happens in Edmonton. We have to have more cities.
I don't even think that even happens though, because it's not. That's not really a thing. Like, no one's like, hey, I went to 7-Eleven, I got it from there. Everyone's got bigger reasons where it comes from.
I think the big problem still is that there's a large fear of the unknown when it comes to what's going on right now, and I think that's the biggest concern at the end of the day here, right? I think, you know, it's difficult when you're dealing with a multi-billion-dollar organization like the National Hockey League, for example, who, you know, every second or every day that goes by without a hockey game on with fans in the seats, you know, they're losing big time money. I mean, you look at the Canadian Football League, they've had to go so far as beginning to have discussions with the Canadian government on getting, you know, bailout money to be able to keep the league intact. You know, how long until, you know, these pro leagues start having to look at something like that? Not saying that they will, but, you know, if for example, we're not able to get fans in seats for, let's just theoretically say, a year from now, you know, you look at a league like the National Hockey League, who a lot of their revenue comes from having fans at the games and door tickets. You know, I wonder if it's going to start to become a difficult thing for these leagues to continue to function as they were.
I want a scenario where Rick takes a job cooking for the NHL and can do this podcast from inside quarantine every week.
I could do this.
Could you imagine?
No problem, bro. I could go fucking work the grill and do this right now. I can chat with you guys and fucking flip some burgers, cook some steaks, no problem.
Speaking of food, this podcast is very happy to be sponsored by the fine folks over at Skip the Dishes. You can get one of our other podcast sponsors, Oodle Noodle, on Skip the Dishes as well. Get the nudes brought straight to your home. That's the one business who's got to be loving this, hey? Skip the Dishes. Everyone's using it now. My parents, who are like the most technologically illiterate people in the world, have figured out two things during quarantine: Netflix and Skip the Dishes. Fascinating to watch.
Just be glad it's not TikTok.
Yeah, no kidding.
I don't think Skip the Dishes is loving this.
Well, I shouldn't say loving this. Yeah.
Well, they can say, hey, listen, they're enjoying the fact they're making some extra cash right now.
They're happy to be able to help out. They're beneficiaries of it's just like our one of our friends of the nation, Belmont Sobeys. They've seen an influx of customers, but they've also seen the ability to help out more, right? And so you're right. They love it, but it's for the right reasons. They're able to give back more, and they're able to do more with more clients now than ever, right? They've got liquor stores on board. They've got new restaurants on board. Everybody's able to come and get help because of Skip the Dishes.
I'm sure they're loving the fact they can help. You're much more articulate than I am, Dan. Skip the dish. Yeah. Okay. The last thing I wanted to get to this week, and we don't have too much time to get to it because all of our other topics have been, we've been getting into it, but TSN has been doing their all-time 7, where they're going to every Canadian franchise and basically picking the best roster possible. Before I give you TSN's list, let me tell you what the criteria were, because it's important. You needed, 4 forward lines, 6 defensemen, 2 goaltenders. Every player must have played at least 225 games with the Oilers. At least one member of the all-time team must be from this year's team. Players are slotted in positions they played with the Oilers. One line of the forwards needs to be considered a checking line. One pairing needs to be considered a shutdown pair. Lines and pairs are together because they fit, not necessarily because they're the first, second, or third best left winger in Oilers history. So let me give you guys the Oilers lineup, and then I want to ask you about some of the tough decisions, because I went and did this exercise myself. But between the pipes, they had Grant Fear and Bill Ranford. I don't think you'll see a lot of people arguing about that because Curtis Joseph didn't qualify. On the back end, it's Paul Coffey with Charlie Huddy, Steve Smith with Randy Gregg, Kevin Lowe with Lee Fogelin on the shutdown pair. The big question here, I think, is do you think Oscar Klefbom belongs on this list, or has he not done enough yet as an Oiler to crack this team?
I think you can find space for him on that list. I think the list was I think it's just really tough to look at the 80s guys and try and pick above them, especially for guys that watched them, right? So these guys that picked them were probably all
boomers.
Well, not quite, but yeah. They watched. They were around there watching hockey in the 80s. They were at least in their teens and got to enjoy that stuff, and vice versa. Especially guys like younger than me, because I was technically alive for all this, but I couldn't tell you I remember a whole bunch of it. So the guys looking backwards are going to look at players and go, "Oh, what the fuck's Steve Smith doing there?" And they're kind of like downplaying it when they were a lot more important on the ice than we realized.
I think that there's more of a debate to be had that Jason Smith belongs on this list.
I would have Jason Smith there before Lee Fogelin.
And does that come from a recency bias? Who knows? But
because I think they were like the same type of player, were they not? Can anyone here answer me that?
Honestly,
yeah. Gator was a shutdown defenseman,
and I think so was Lee Fogelin. And the fact that we have 2 left-handed guys playing the right side is kind of weird too.
But that's good.
And TSN says that Kevin Lowe, Lee Fogelin are the team's quote shutdown pair, which is something that each team needed to have. So in theory, you could swap out Fogelin for Gator and be good to go.
So what's the Steve Smith, Randy Gregg line? Is that just like the next set after the best and the most pairing, defensive?
Yeah.
Those are third and fourth best defensemen.
It does. I mean, it does tell you that through the 90s and the 2000s today, we haven't had a lot of defensemen.
No,
and also those guys all have championships next to their name, right? Like they have Stanley Cup rings.
Yeah, but you can be thanking the guys listed lower than those guys.
Of course,
on this graphic. Of
course, but it plays into it.
Although
right?
Paul Coffey was.
Your bias can play over that when it comes to Stanley Cup champions. But it's why Ovechkin is compared to Crosby, and Crosby wins every time.
Crosby's a better all around.
Well,
player.
yeah, but you know what I mean. Like the Stanley Cups just put you over the edge. So I get it, but yeah.
But you can't even come up with a defenseman from the 90s that you would try and sneak on that defensive lineup.
No.
Right? Like the best defensemen from the 90s are like Roman Hammerlick, and I know a couple guys were saying Boris Minov and Yanni Niinema, but even without the cups, I don't think I'm taking any of those over like a Charlie Huddy or Randy Gregg.
Yeah, so
and to be fair, I guess Randy Gregg and Lee Fogolin, I think, are the ones that are most biggest question marks to what I remember.
I actually, today I had a chance to chat with Steve Dryden, who's the guy, he's the guy in charge of this. He's going around talking to, old beat reporters and digging through the stats and all that stuff of this. And we asked him point blank the question of, did you feel there's too many 80s Oilers? And he said when he talked to people, he would say, we're trying our best to not just make this the 80s Oilers. Like, think about some guys who maybe weren't on good teams who did good. And then he said every time you would just get down to a tough decision and go, fuck, look at what, or he didn't swear, obviously, because he's a very nice man. But I'm paraphrasing. He would kind of go like, well, how do you discount a guy with 3 or 4 rings, right? And I think that's kind of the difficulty in doing this from an Oilers perspective, even when you go to the forward group. The top line, Ryan Smith, granted, doesn't have a ring, but Gretzky, Curry. Then you have Craig Simpson with Messier and Anderson. Connor McDavid, Draisaitl, Hemsky. There's kind of your next generation line for the Oilers. And then you have Craig McTavish with Kelly Buchberger and Esa Tikkanen. Like a guy like Mike Greer got left off this team. A guy like Taylor Hall even got left off this team. But up front, as I read those names to you, is there one glaring omission to anyone? I'll start with you on this one, Zach.
I think probably Taylor Hall or maybe even Doug Wade are probably the largest omissions for me. I don't know if I take Craig McTavish over Doug Wade. And I'm not sure about Craig Simpson over top of Taylor Hall.
You have to take Craig McTavish, though, doesn't it? Because isn't that the shutdown role?
Well, yeah, it's the checking line thing. You could have put a Horkoff there.
Okay, but either way, Doug Wade doesn't sneak in there.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, like if it didn't have to have the term of checking line, I'd probably have a guy like Wade over McTavish, right?
Oh yeah, because otherwise this looks like Rob Zamner over Mark Messier in Nagano, where they just they took the role player instead of the best player. Yeah,
exactly, and I think that's part of the problem that, and sort of what you have to remember when we're looking at this is that they had a very specific set of criteria for filling out this roster. Like they were trying to build a team that could play and in the mind of a general manager, right? So I think if anything, given all of it, I think I'd probably take Taylor Hall over Craig Simpson on that second line alongside Messier and Anderson. But beyond that, I mean, shit, I think it's pretty hard to argue against any of these options that they've made. Like, this is the thing; these guys are all champions. These guys all have multiple rings, with and without Edmonton, for the most part, right? I love seeing Hemsky beside McDavid and Draisaitl. Could you imagine seeing those guys play together these days? Good God!
You nailed it, Zach, when you said it. It's the criteria that they created, and whenever you play these games, it depends on the rules that you put in place. A guy like Doug Wade absolutely should be on a list, but he can't fit in behind Messier and Gretzky and McDavid, and because you have to have that third or that fourth line grinder. So it's just the rules that they made. Like when you read the comments on the original tweet, it's like every TSN guy has to come in and be like, follow the rules, follow the rules, follow the rules.
And it really shows you how, when you read those threads, it really shows you how many people have no idea what they're talking about. I remember seeing something about Kevin Lowe being a plug.
Yeah.
And I just shook my head and
it's recency bias, and it just that's the reality of it all, right? We're in a specific demographic of.
I think it's bigger than that though, because recency bias is like, hey, you know what? I didn't really watch that guy way back when, but this is what I've seen.
Well,
just stupidity. And that's what I mean, though, right? But that's what you say. It's like, I really wasn't around when Kevin Lowe was, but I saw this guy play instead. It's stupidity to turn back and not know what you're talking about. Or maybe you did watch Kevin Lowe and you still think he's a plug. Well, that's just dumb.
Just wait until you see the Habs and the fucking Leafs lineups, right? Like that's over 100 years of history, and you're gonna try and tell me that anybody on the current roster, except for maybe Carey Price, is gonna crack those lineups. It's just.
I saw one guy said sneaking Gallagher in there and then pulling somebody out.
But yeah, they put out Montreal's
but it's just on that. It's just on that one line, right? It was like a thread or whatever, and dude's like, yeah, just put Gallagher in there, take somebody else out, and then you can use Patrick Waugh as their goalie.
It's a fun exercise to do either way. I went through the exercise all week on TSN, myself and Matt Iwanek, and basically the changes we made to this team were, people forget Mark Messier was an all-star as a left winger. So what we did is we moved Messier up to that first line left wing spot, took off Ryan Smith. Our second line was Draisaitl, McDavid, and Anderson. Our third line had Doug Waite with Alish Hemsky, and we actually put Taylor Hall on that left side. And then our fourth line was McTavish with Tikkanen, and we had Mike Greer on the right side. And then you needed something called a foundational player, which is a player that is defined as the fabric or the DNA of a franchise. When you think fabric and DNA of a franchise, it's Taylor Hall, right?
Smitty.
Or sorry, no, yeah, it's Ryan Smith. Jesus. Wow.
What's that?
I have made...
I would like everyone to know he said that with a straight face, too.
Stuck with it. It's Taylor Hall, right? And then just ended the podcast right there.
Man, I am on another level right now. It's because I was staring right at the last cuts page when I did it and was looking at Taylor Hall's name. Yeah. But when you think DNA of the Oilers, it's Ryan Smith, right?
Smith.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that's the Oilers. Like, I don't know, it's one of those things, right? Because the Oilers in the 90s and leaching into the middle of the 2000s, that's exactly who I think of. Now it's different, and in the 80s it was very different. But yeah, I guess when you think of an Edmonton Oiler, it's either Kevin Lowe or it's Ryan Smith.
Yeah,
those are the two guys when I think of a player to be the Edmonton Oilers. It's Ryan Smith or Kevin Lowe.
Yeah,
well, foundational. I mean, without having to try and tinker with your lineup to try and fit him in there. If you just had to pick one guy as your foundational player, just period, I think it's Kevin Lowe. He's been around forever. He keeps coming back. He will never leave here.
He knows a thing or two about winning.
Yeah, he bleeds Oilers, man.
Yeah, and that's a good point. He brought him. He was a part of all 5 of those rings, and he almost helped bring them a cup in 2006. Not a lot of people can say they were a part of all of that success in Oilers history. Okay, we're gonna steer away from this because we only have a couple minutes left in the podcast. I have my buttons ready. It is time for our hot and cold performers, brought to you by Oodle Noodle. They're donating 10% of all in-store pickup takeout orders to local charities for the next while here, which is one of the many fantastic initiatives that they have been doing. As Baggedmilk says, we start with our veggies. We start with our cold performer of the week. Dan, I'm putting you on the spot first.
Yeah, I got it. It's plain and simple. I don't want to get too political about it, but it's the fucking idiots that went and protested the lockdown at the legislature the other day, and specifically the idiot that was driving the modified fire truck that then got it stuck on the high-level bridge.
People should have backed their trucks up behind him and kept him there. Everyone's getting out of his way. I was like, dude, get behind him and just keep him there. Well, make him look like an idiot.
Every time, I understand, I support the right to protest or whatever, but what you're really doing is putting out EPS service members. You've got them running traffic for you to try and get your stupid fire truck toy out of the bridge area that you didn't know clearance of. It was frustrating on every level. And if that's the reason that we go back into quarantine, I'm going to be extra pissed. So they're my cold performer of the week.
Rick.
Well, Dan kind of stole it there because I was, being downtown around that, it was right on my doorstep. It felt like, but I'll just specify down to the one idiot with the Trump flag and the Trump flag out there. Come on, guys! Seriously, you want them? Pack your shit, take off. See ya. Simple.
Zach, you got a cold performer of the week?
My cold performer of the week are all the assholes who are driving their very loud cars through downtown Edmonton. Very annoying.
Can you hear the races later?
Terrible. Fucking hate it, man. All the guys with their motorbikes and the guy at the blue Lamborghini. Bunch of assholes.
Yeah, down 104 Ave, they'll go firing at 11:30. You can hear a race. It's a
I know. I could see it from my condo. It's terrible, man. I hate
it. My cold performer of the week is I don't mean to keep hammering this, but I'm going back to the golf debate. People who seem to be bragging to others, they're like, "Oh yeah, I told you I'd be golfing in May. I told you," and it's maybe this whole pandemic, if it should have taught us anything, should have taught us a little bit of compassion, you know, and maybe we don't need to be assholes online about every single little thing. So it's Twitter in general though, because when it first started, it was like, oh, why can't we golf? Just simple question. Then it was like, hey, you rich assholes, stop trying to be so luxurious and blah, 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 blah. And that's where it all started from. Yeah. It's
like, there was a legit question as to can you, can't you, why, what if we do this, that, or the other thing, that you can sit down there and as adults have a conversation. Then it was like, hey, you fucking rich fucks, blah, 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 blah. And it's just been back and forth the whole time. So yeah, it's been stupid. I'm a golfer. I want to golf right now, but I'm staying way out of that conversation now.
Yeah, it got so toxic so quickly. So the people who kind of steered it in a bad direction, they're my cold performers. And now we get to the fun part, the hot performers of the week. We'll flip the order a little bit here, and I'll go with you, Zach. You got a hot performer of the week?
My hot performer of the week is going to be none other than Ken Holland. He's been lighting it up with some signings. And,
Oilers related and everything. Good for you.
That's fine.
Rick?
I'm going to go out with Dr. Hinshaw here. You know, I get to start golfing here right away, but more importantly, in 2 weeks, I get to go back to work. So, everyone, let's just do this right thing for the next 2 weeks, and let's get back a little bit of normalcy.
Put some respect on my name.
Dano.
So I actually did some research for this one because the province of Nova Scotia, I don't know if you guys knew, but I used to live in Halifax.
Oh, really?
No way.
Has been absolutely just mortalized with this pandemic, and then the worst shooting in Canadian history, and now the HMCS helicopter that was lost, and sadly, all members perished in that crash. It's been a tough time for Nova Scotia, but there was a feel-good story that came out of Nova Scotia. I will share it somehow through social media, but in Musquodoboit Harbor yesterday, a 3-year-old girl went missing. And goodest of good boys, service dog Jinx, interrupted his training, or her training, when they heard the call for this to go out and try and find her. And on the doggo's own, they were out and they heard a little girl's voice say "doggy," and that was how they found her. So my hot performer of the week is Constable Dan Berube and his service dog Jinx for finding a 3-year-old girl in Nova Scotia and averting another disastrous, sad story coming from that province who's just been riddled with them all.
My hot performer, I'm actually just going to agree with Zach because as someone who makes a living off talking about hockey and sports in general and who needs to come up with the content, Ken Holland gave us the content. It wasn't a lot, nothing too flashy, but he went out there, and I feel like Ken Holland was like personally doing me a solid. So big shout out to Uncle Ken for the help in the last week and giving us something to talk about. We had a lot to get to this week, and we got through pretty much all of it. So thanks for playing along, guys. Thanks for doing the little armchair GM stuff with me as well, and correcting me when I said things like skip the dishes supports pandemics, which isn't what I meant at all, or when I said Taylor Hall was the face of the franchise.
Just please put out a promo for the podcast that has you saying, I think when you think of one player, it's Taylor Hall, and then that's it. No context at all.
Yeah, he gets to save all the clips on his own there, right? Someone's got to clip that stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna get Surveyor Brett's gonna have that one clip.
Amazing.
Yeah. Oh man. All right, thanks for listening. Thanks for doing this, guys. Have a good weekend. Episode 84 of Oilers Nation Radio is over.
Best Shout out Davian.
Thanks for listening to Oilers Nation Radio, a member of the Nation Network of Podcasts. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media to stay up to date and never miss a podcast.